The studio lights glared as Robert De Niro adjusted his jacket, preparing for what was meant to be a controlled political discussion. The host introduced him with applause, but the moment Pam Bondi's name was mentioned, De Niro's smile faded. She walked in confidently, a calm presence contrasting the tension in the air. The crowd didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness something unforgettable. Pam took her seat across from De Niro, looking composed and unbothered. De Niro wasted no time, with all due respect, he said sarcastically. People like you are what's wrong with this country. A few audience members clapped nervously. Pam leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on him. People like me? She asked with a light tone. You mean lawyers who still believe in due process? The studio air got heavy. The host tried to steer the conversation, but De Niro was already spiraling. I don't want her here. I told your producers not to bring partisan hacks onto my segment. His voice grew louder. Get her off my show. There was a stunned silence. The host froze. Audience members turned to one another in disbelief. But Pam just smiled, that subtle, knowing smile. She didn't stand up. She didn't argue. Instead, she calmly asked, Is this how you treat women who disagree with you, or just ones who can argue you in front of a crowd? That single line lit up social media. Cameras zoomed in. Hashtags began trending within minutes. #De Niro meltdown, #Pam owned it, #live TV disaster. Behind the scenes, producers debated cutting to commercial, but the drama was too raw to interrupt. De Niro, realizing he was losing control of the room, leaned back, fuming. Pam picked up her notes, not to defend herself, but to reveal something. Emails and documents detailing De Niro's behind. The scene's involvement in shady political donations. While you act as a hero of the people, she said coolly, these suggest otherwise. The studio gasped. De Niro looked like he'd been hit. You're not supposed to have that. He snapped. Pam replied, Then maybe you shouldn't have sent it to the wrong law firm. The host whispered to the producer, We're witnessing a live implosion. And it was true. What started as a takedown attempt had turned into a public reckoning. Viewers at home couldn't look away. When the segment ended, Pam stood and thanked the host with grace. De Niro, still fuming, refused to speak further. But the damage had been done not to Pam, but to his reputation. That night, clips flooded every corner of the internet. In less than 24 hours, mainstream news, YouTube, and late-night comedians all replayed the moment where Robert De Niro screamed to get Pam off his show and instead handed her the mic. And she never let go. The fallout from the live broadcast was more severe than anyone had predicted. Robert De Niro, once hailed as the lion of Hollywood's resistance, had turned into a viral meme. His furious shout, "Get her off my show," was now ringtone material. But what stung more was Pam Bondi's silence. She hadn't mocked him afterward, no press tour, no victory lap, just silence, and that silence was louder than any insult. Behind closed doors, De Niro was livid. His inner circle urged him to let it go. You're Robert De Niro. They told him, she'll disappear in a week. But she didn't. She was invited to major panels. Her clips were shown in law schools. And even networks that once criticized her began calling her sharp, composed, and lethal under pressure. That's when De Niro made a decision. He would set up another round on his terms. His team arranged a special debate series to be filmed in New York, titled The American Divide. It was billed as a bold, unfiltered, no-script forum with real voices from both sides. Behind the scenes, though, it was tailored to favor De Niro. The moderators were carefully selected. The questions would be sent in advance to him. And most importantly, Pam Bondi would not be invited. At least that was the plan. But 2 days before taping, the network's legal team insisted, to maintain fairness and avoid bias complaints, Bondi had to be included. The contract had been signed weeks ago. Her name was already locked into the show's official guest list. When De Niro heard, he slammed his fist against the conference table. She's not stepping on that stage again. But she did. When Pam entered the studio, she wasn't smiling this time. She looked focused. Controlled, her confidence wasn't cocky, it was surgical. De Niro avoided eye contact, tapping his fingers under the table as the cameras rolled. The first 20 minutes of the show went to plan. De Niro answered the questions smoothly. The audience applauded. Then the moderator turned to Pam. "Your thoughts on what Mr. De Niro just said?" Pam looked directly at Robert for the first time. "You spoke of justice, Robert. But justice without consistency is just performance. And you've made a career out of performance." Gasps again. Even the host froze for a beat. Robert chuckled coldly. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." She continued, "Last time, you tried to scream me out of the room. This time, you made sure the room was built without me in mind. But guess what? I'm still here." This time, the crowd didn't just clap. They stood. Live audiences don't fake energy like that. The clip aired that night across every network. Pam didn't humiliate him. She exposed him quietly, steadily. And that unnerved him more. Later that night, De Niro sat alone, scrolling through headlines. Bondi outsmarts De Niro again. Without raising her voice. Pam Bondi, the unshakable counterpunch. And for the first time, Robert De Niro wondered if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the most powerful voice in the room anymore. Robert De Niro was no longer angry, he was calculating. The second televised encounter had shattered any illusion that the first was a fluke. Pam Bondi didn't just survive his world, she reshaped it in real time. Her grace under fire, her calm dismantling of his arguments, and her refusal to gloat had earned her something dangerous: respect from both sides. And in Robert's world, that kind of power couldn't go unchecked. So he vanished. For weeks, there were no appearances, no statements, just rumors. Pam, meanwhile, was invited to keynote conferences, law school panels, even Sunday morning political shows where she articulated her views without personal attacks or theatrics. People who once dismissed her as just another talking head were now leaning forward when she spoke. Then, out of nowhere, Robert returned. He announced a bold new documentary series titled The Curtain Falls, marketed as an unflinching exploration of corruption in the American justice system. The trailer was cinematic, dimly lit hallways, shadowy figures, grainy audio clips. Narrated by De Niro himself, the opening line was clear: "Some people wear suits, others wear masks, but both can lie to the American people." People immediately began speculating. Was this a shot at Bondi? Pam's team remained silent, but she knew what this was. The first episode dropped on a Thursday night. Within the first 10 minutes, it became obvious. This wasn't a documentary. It was an attack piece. De Niro used selectively edited interviews, old courtroom footage, and misleading voiceovers to paint Pam as a political operator rather than a legal mind. He even brought in former critics of hers, people with clear biases, to give damning testimonies. But he had made one fatal mistake. In trying to rewrite the narrative, he fabricated parts of it. The very next day, Pam held a quiet press briefing. No dramatics, no yelling, just facts. She presented emails, signed statements, and video clips proving that multiple claims made in De Niro's documentary were either distorted or entirely false. And then came the twist. Pam revealed that she had been contacted by 2 former crew members of De Niro's production, whistleblowers, who were disturbed by how much was manipulated. One of them, appearing via video face blurred, said, "We were told the truth didn't matter, just the outcome. It was a hit job, plain and simple. It was no longer just a feud. It was now a legal problem." Lawsuits began brewing. Media outlets that had promoted the documentary quietly removed their endorsements. De Niro's PR team went silent. Late night shows that once applauded him now asked uncomfortable questions. And Pam, she didn't claim victory. She didn't mock him. She simply said, when someone uses storytelling to destroy truth, the law has a duty to respond. The press called it the greatest reversal of narrative in recent political media history. And for the first time, Robert De Niro, master of scripted control, realized he was now part of a story he couldn't direct. Season 4 will be different, because next time, it's not going to be live TV. It's going to be court. The courtroom was quieter than a film set, but the stakes were far greater. There were no retakes, no lighting adjustments, no editors to trim away mistakes. Just a judge, a jury, and two people who had once shared the same stage in front of millions, now seated on opposite sides of the courtroom. Robert De Niro sat flanked by his legal team, staring straight ahead, eyes fixed on nothing. His once commanding presence now felt worn. The confidence he wore on television had been replaced by calculation, nerves carefully hidden under a composed exterior. He still believed he had a shot. This was his territory: public opinion, drama, storytelling. But this time, Pam Bondi wasn't just a guest. She was the plaintiff. The case wasn't about politics anymore. It was about defamation, character assassination, and the weaponization of media under the disguise of journalism. Pam's legal team presented a clear, meticulous case. They laid out every manipulated edit in the documentary, side-by-side footage comparisons, contradictory statements, witnesses who testified under oath that De Niro had been briefed on the falsehoods but approved them anyway. But what changed everything was the email. A single email, sent by De Niro's lead producer to a staffer, surfaced during the discovery process. It read, "We don't care if it's airtight. We just need it to feel true. Pam's the villain, period." The courtroom shifted. Even the judge blinked in disbelief. De Niro's defense team scrambled. They claimed creative license, journalistic freedom, public interest. But the tone of the room had changed. The jury, once neutral, was now visibly engaged with Bondi's team. No theatrics, no grandstanding, just facts, timelines, and credibility. Pam never once raised her voice. Her testimony was calm, precise, and personal. She spoke not as a politician or a media figure, but as someone who had been deliberately targeted, misrepresented, and nearly buried under the weight of a false story crafted by a man who had every platform in the world at his disposal. She ended her statement with quiet force. Mr. De Niro wanted to make a film. Instead, he made a lie, and the difference between the two is justice. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The media frenzy outside the courthouse only grew louder, but inside, the verdict was reached in silence. Robert De Niro was found liable, damages were awarded, apologies issued, but the bigger blow wasn't financial. It was legacy. For someone whose career had been built on truth through performance, the verdict had declared his performance dishonest, his intent malicious, and his method reckless. Pam Bondi stepped out of the courtroom to a sea of flashing lights, microphones, and shouting reporters. She didn't celebrate. She gave a short, firm statement. This was never about revenge. It was about responsibility. Speech is free. Lies are not. Inside, Robert remained seated, unmoving, as reporters shouted questions he no longer had answers for. His world of scripts and monologues had been replaced by one terrifying reality. There was no rewriting this ending. And yet, the story wasn't over, because in the aftermath, something unexpected began to stir. An anonymous letter, postmarked from California, arrived at Pam Bondi's office. One sentence, handwritten, he wasn't acting alone. And just like that, the curtain lifted again. Season 5 was already writing itself. The letter sat on Pam Bondi's desk for 2 days before she touched it again. No return address. No signature, just one clean line written in sharp, uneven pen. He wasn't acting alone. At first, she considered it a hoax, some troll trying to stir up attention after the trial. But the envelope had a strange weight, not just physical, but intentional. There was something about the handwriting, unsteady, like someone was rushing, or nervous. Inside, folded neatly, was a second sheet. Names, initials, and production company meeting dates, including timestamps matching critical moments in De Niro's documentary timeline. There were names she recognized, not Hollywood actors, but political operatives, strategists, people who had never shown their faces on camera but pulled strings behind them. Suddenly, the trial seemed like the surface. Pam's instincts kicked in. She called in her most trusted investigator, the same one who had found the whistleblowers during the lawsuit. Together, They began verifying the notes, cross-referencing flight logs, meeting records. Surveillance images. Within days, a quiet trail began to appear. It wasn't just De Niro. He had been a willing face, a mouthpiece, but the machinery behind him had been larger. There were connections to political donors, media executives, and, most chillingly, a PC Political Action Committee that had made large, last-minute donations to the company that produced the now discredited documentary. Pam faced a choice: let it go and enjoy the victory, or dig deeper, knowing what it might cost. She didn't hesitate. She quietly met with a federal prosecutor she had once worked with. What she presented wasn't enough for arrests, but it was more than enough for an investigation. The prosecutor listened silently, flipping through the printouts, frowning at the dates. When he closed the folder, he said only one thing: if this is true, you're about to walk into something far bigger than De Niro. Days turned into weeks. One by one, former assistants, interns, and ex-staffers from the production company began coming forward. Most anonymously, some reluctantly. Their stories were nearly identical. Directives from unnamed higher-ups, cash bonuses for digging up dirt on Pam, pressure to exaggerate narratives. Then came the breakthrough. One staffer agreed to meet in person. She was young, mid-20s, terrified. At a quiet diner on the edge of town, she slid a flash drive across the table. They used encrypted chat apps. She whispered, "But I took screen recordings. I knew what they were doing was wrong." Pam took the drive without a word. That night, she plugged it in. The footage was damning. Messages between senior media executives and political handlers. Clear coordination, even a message that read, "De Niro's meltdown is perfect. Let him burn. Bondi will never see what's behind the curtain." But she had. Now it wasn't about personal revenge. It was a matter of national integrity. How media, celebrity, and hidden money had conspired to destroy reputations and influence public trust. Pam knew going public with this would bring a storm, but she also knew one truth: once a lie is exposed, it demands justice. And this time, it wouldn't be fought on a stage or in a courtroom. It would be a war behind doors, and Pam Bondi had already stepped inside. Season 6 is no longer about reputation. It's about dismantling the machine. The flash drive wasn't just proof, it was a map. It outlined months of secret coordination, showing how a network of elites had worked behind the scenes, not just to defame her, but to create a controlled illusion. Fake outrage, fake debates, manipulated journalism. It wasn't just about her anymore. They had done this to others: judges, whistleblowers, journalists, anyone who threatened the agenda. She kept her moves quiet. She brought in a small team, legal minds, cybersecurity experts, 2 former federal agents she trusted from her time in office. They met in private locations, used burner phones, and stored all data offline. One of her team members looked at her across a table and said, "You realize if we take this public, we're not just naming names, we're lighting a fuse." Pam nodded. She wasn't backing down. A pattern emerged. Media campaigns launched within days of private meetings, coordinated smear attacks hitting right before elections, and encrypted group chats between executives and donors. Then something shocking surfaced. 2 well-known senators had attended a private screening of the documentary months before it aired. The guest list was secret, but a forgotten metadata tag on an internal photo revealed everything. She handed the evidence to a trusted federal investigator. Within 48 hours, the Justice Department quietly launched a task force. Off the record without leaks. The government wasn't ready to go public. The names were too big, the implications too massive, but Pam knew she couldn't wait. They'd try to bury it. She needed a trigger, so she set it herself. At a press conference disguised as a legal education summit, she stepped to the podium with a calm voice and a small folder in hand. Cameras rolled. The crowd expected a typical speech on law and ethics. But 5 minutes in, the tone shifted. "There is a machine working beneath the surface of our national conversation," she said, "and I've seen its blueprints." She didn't name everyone, but she named enough. She laid out the flow of money, the media manipulation, the silencing of truth. Then she held up the flash drive. This isn't theory, this is proof. The media exploded. News anchors scrambled to decode what she had just triggered. Some tried to downplay it. Others tried to twist it. But the internet had already taken hold. The drive's contents were released through independent investigators and verified by digital forensic teams. The backlash was immediate. The PSC offices were raided. The production company shut down their website. And Robert De Niro, he released a short statement. I was used. But the public wasn't buying it. He had been a willing face in the campaign, and now that face was unraveling under the weight of the truth. But Pam didn't celebrate. She knew this wasn't the end. 2 days later, a car followed her home. Unmarked, no license plates, then another. She received a burner phone in the mail with a single message flashing on screen. You should have stopped. But it was too late for that. The machine was real. It was wounded, and now it was turning on her. But Pam Bondi had no intention of running. She was about to go further than anyone had dared. Season 7 would no longer be about survival. It would be about exposure, total, public, and permanent.